What is a service mesh? A service mesh is a dedicated infrastructure layer that manages service-to-service communication, providing features like traffic control, security, and observability without app changes. How does a service mesh differ from an API gateway? While an API gateway handles traffic entering and exiting a system, a service mesh manages internal service-to-service communication within a microservices architecture. What problem does a service mesh solve? Service mesh helps manage complexities like traffic routing, retries, load balancing, and security, all without modifying application code, making it ideal for microservice architectures. Name two popular service mesh implementations. Istio and Linkerd are two popular service mesh implementations, providing robust traffic management, security, and observability features. How does a service mesh enhance security? A service mesh provides features like mutual TLS, MTLS, securing communication between services, and enforcing policies at the service level. What is sidecar architecture in a service mesh? In a service mesh, sidecar architecture involves deploying a proxy next to each service instance, intercepting all network traffic and applying policies transparently. Can a service mesh work with monolithic applications? Service mesh is primarily designed for microservices architectures, but it can be used in monolithic applications if service-to-service communication is a concern. How does service mesh help in observability? A service mesh provides observability by collecting and analyzing telemetry data like logs, metrics, and traces from the sidecar proxies handling service communication. Is it necessary to modify application code to use a service mesh? No, service mesh operates at the network layer and does not require changes to the application code. How does a service mesh handle traffic routing? Service mesh uses sidecar proxies to apply traffic control policies like load balancing, retries, and fault injection, allowing fine-grained control of service traffic. What is service registration in service mesh? Service registration is the process of a service informing the service mesh control plane of its existence. This includes providing information such as its name, address, and port. This allows other services to discover and communicate with it. What is service discovery in service mesh? Service discovery is the process of dynamically locating and communicating with other services. It is typically handled by the control plane of the service mesh. How does a service mesh improve zero-trust security models? A service mesh strengthens zero-trust models by enforcing strict authentication, authorization, and encryption, MTLS, between all services, eliminating assumptions of trusted networks. Compare Consul and Istio service mesh implementations. Consul provides service discovery, configuration, and segmentation, while Istio focuses on richer traffic management, security, and observability features, often with more complexity. Explain how a service mesh simplifies microservice deployment. A service mesh abstracts away communication complexities like routing, retries, and security, enabling microservices to communicate reliably without developers managing these details. Describe the concept of policy enforcement in a service mesh. Policy enforcement ensures services adhere to predefined rules for access control, traffic routing, rate limiting, and security, providing consistent governance across the network. What role do sidecar proxies play in monitoring service health? Sidecar proxies collect real-time telemetry data and provide insights into service performance, helping detect issues early by measuring latency, error rates, and traffic patterns. How does MTLS differ from TLS in service mesh? MTLS authenticates both client and server endpoints, while TLS only authenticates the server only. TLS is a one-way authentication protocol. MTLS, on the other hand, is a two-way authentication protocol. In summary, MTLS is a more secure and robust option for securing communication. Explain the architecture of Envoy Proxy in Istio. Envoy Proxy is deployed as a sidecar to handle all inbound and outbound traffic for a service. It enforces policies such as routing, retrieve, and security, while the control plane manages configurations. How does a service mesh handle latency-sensitive services? A service mesh can be configured to prioritize low-latency services by adjusting traffic policies, such as circuit breaking and retrieve, and by optimizing sidecar proxy configurations. What are the resource overhead considerations for deploying a service mesh? Deploying a service mesh introduces resource overhead due to the sidecar proxies and control plane, requiring careful planning to avoid excessive CPU/memory usage, especially in large clusters. How does service mesh manage traffic across multiple clusters? A service mesh supports multi-cluster deployments by extending its control plane across clusters, enabling consistent policies and traffic management for inter-cluster communication. How can rate limiting be implemented in a service mesh? Rate limiting is implemented by setting traffic policies in the control plane, where the sidecar proxies enforce limits on the number of requests a service can handle per second/minute. What does pilot component in Istio do? The pilot component in Istio is responsible for service discovery. It maintains a registry of services and their endpoints, and provides this information to other components within the mesh.
What is Envoy Proxy in Istio? Envoy Proxy in Istio is the data plane component responsible for handling all traffic between services. It acts as a sidecar proxy to applications, intercepting and controlling network traffic. What is the role of control plane and data plane in a service mesh? The control plane configures the network behavior and policies, while the data plane, sidecars, enforces these rules by managing real-time traffic between services. How do you enable traffic splitting in Istio? In Istio, traffic splitting is configured by defining a virtual service, which allows you to route percentages of traffic to different versions of a service for canary or A/B testing. Compare service mesh and Kubernetes ingress controllers. Kubernetes ingress controllers manage traffic at the edge, directing it to services, while service mesh controls internal service communication, providing richer traffic management and security. How does Linkerd differ from Istio in terms of performance? Linkerd focuses on lightweight performance with minimal resource overhead, while Istio offers more features but is considered heavier in terms of complexity and resource usage. Describe how observability is integrated in Linkerd. Linkerd provides out-of-the-box observability, offering real-time metrics, distributed tracing, and request logs through integrations with Prometheus and Grafana. How can circuit breaking be implemented in a service mesh? Circuit breaking in service mesh is implemented by setting thresholds for failures, and once breached, it stops routing requests to the failing service, preventing cascading failures. What is a virtual service in Istio? A virtual service in Istio defines how requests are routed to a Kubernetes service, allowing advanced traffic management features like traffic splitting, retrieve, and fault injection. How is load balancing configured in a service mesh? Load balancing is configured via policies defined in the control plane, which the sidecar proxies then enforce at runtime, distributing traffic evenly across service instances. Explain traffic mirroring in Istio. Traffic mirroring allows you to clone live traffic and send it to a mirrored service for testing purposes, without impacting the primary service's performance or behavior. What is fault injection in service mesh? Fault injection introduces simulated errors, latency, failures, into service communication to test the system's resilience, helping teams identify potential weaknesses in failure scenarios.